Hi, I'm Teresa, and I will be doing Role A for our condition presentation on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And we will start with an overview of the condition, and then we will end with a video. The overview of ADHD. The American Psychiatric Association and the DSM-5 describes ADHD as a pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity or impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development, with symptoms that are excessive for age or developmental level of children. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder, which means that it's a condition with onset during developmental stages. Inattention is manifested through careless mistakes in schoolwork, does not seem to listen when spoken to, difficulty following directions or completing tasks. The symptom of impulsiveness is manifested through hasty actions that occur in the moment without forethought and that have high potential for harm to the individual. I did see in a video where they talked about a child that climbs up the slide, and instead of sliding down the slide, they jump off of the slide, where they can potentially get hurt, and they don't think about the consequences of that. And then there's another part of the impulsiveness, which is social intrusiveness, intruding into other people's activities. They are inability to wait their turn. They'll cut in front of line or throw a fit because it's not their turn yet. They often talk over others or interrupt before a question is complete. The hyperactivity part is manifested by difficulty sitting still, fidgeting, excessive talking, and then playing or talking louder than others or what would be considered normal. And now into the specific diagnostic criteria. The manifestations of the disorder must be present in more than one setting. So it must occur at home and at school. It can't just occur at one or the other. Substantial clinical presentation during childhood. And they did the onset at age 12, and that's mostly due to adult recall, because when a person is not diagnosed as a child and they are an adult suffering with issues and they're trying to go back and diagnose them with ADHD, the recall is sometimes difficult to determine the exact age, so they did do that onset at age 12. Comorbidity with the ADHD would be specific learning disorders. It's very common for children to be diagnosed with specific learning disorders in school. Also, disruptive mood disorder and oppositional defiant disorder is diagnosed also with ADHD in half of children in a clinical setting. And then oppositional defiant disorder can increase and then become conduct disorder in about a quarter of children in a clinical setting. In differential diagnosis, those are things such as autism, spectrum disorder, reactive attachment disorder, and personality disorders. These things kind of trump ADHD, and though they have similar symptoms, most of the time these are the diagnosis and not ADHD. ADHD is not diagnosed if the symptoms of inattentiveness and or hyperactivity occur exclusively during the course of disorders such as anxiety disorders, during specific like anxiety attacks, bipolar disorder, when they're manic, and they're displaying, hyperactivity and things like that. If it's only during the manic episode, they would not be diagnosed as ADHD. Substance use disorders during their times of use, if they're having the symptoms of ADHD, but not when they're not using substances. And the same would go for the psychotic disorders. If they're in a psychotic episode, it would not count. And now we're going to go over some statistics from the American Psychiatric Association, also from the DSM-5. There's an increased risk of suicide attempt with ADHD, primarily when comorbid with mood, conduct, or substance use disorders. It's also associated with reduced school performance, academic attainment, and social rejection. And that a lot is to do with the specific learning disorders that can accompany ADHD and the difficulty that children have in school. And they have a hard time making grades and moving on to the next level and passing tests. In adults, there's a poor occupational performance, attainment. They go through a lot of different jobs and attendance. There's a high risk of absenteeism and a higher probability of unemployment due to the attainment and absentee issues. ADHD occurs more frequently in males than it does in females. In children, it's 2 to 1. And in adults, it is 6 to 1. And females are more likely than males to present primarily with inattentive features, rather than males are more likely to present with the hyperactivity and impulsivity than they are with the inattentive features, where women are more likely to have the inattentive features. So now we're going to watch a video. This is a video from TED on YouTube. And this individual who is going to be talking in the video actually has ADHD and is going to talk a little bit about how that's affected him.
Now, millions of people from around the world suffer from various different learning disabilities, each varying in severity and the way it influences and affects the way they live their lives. Now, I personally suffer from a condition known as ADHD, and ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Now, there's a common misconception that individuals with ADHD cannot concentrate on one thing at a time and are very easily distracted. Now, as much as this is true for certain individuals, it doesn't manifest itself that way with all. Now, many people have a preconceived idea that ADHD is just an excuse for children to get away with unruly or disruptive behaviour. Now, this can be quite offensive to people such as myself, as these people obviously don't understand what ADHD truly is. ADHD is a medically diagnosed condition according to the United States Institute of Mental Health, and it affects the way people react to and process information that enters the brain. Now, ADHD doesn't make my life easier because I get benefits, help, or extra time. No, it makes my life harder because I have to learn how to deal with it. I have to learn how to live with it. Now, I'm going to give you an example of what an average day in the person of an ADHD person feels like, right? So I want you to picture a big city, and I want you to picture an intersection, right? So you've got all these things going on. You've got buses, you've got cars, you've got people talking, you've got sounds, you've got all these things going on, and it's overwhelming, right? And I want you to imagine that sense of confusion and having that sense of confusion on a daily basis. Now, most people within 30 minutes or an hour of being in that sort of environment will eventually start to filter out all the white noise. And you'll start to concentrate on the reason why you were there in the first place, which would be the pair of trousers you were going to buy, or the fact that you were hungry and you were looking for a restaurant. However, the problem with people with ADHD is we don't have that filter. We can't just filter things out, and I'm just sort of going to explain to you what it's like. So, for normal people without ADHD, imagine you've got a filing cabinet, and you've got all these folders in that filing cabinet, and you've been tasked to file files into this filing cabinet. So let's say you get a file, and that file is a bus, right? It's the sound of a bus driving by. And what you do is you take that file and you put it in the designated folder. But when that file comes again, it's an identical copy, you look at it, but you don't register it as important information. You already have that file, so you put it in the trash. However, with people with ADHD, it's nothing like this. No matter how many times that identical copy comes through, you continuously file it. You're getting the same information multiple times. And that's why we spend most of our day going through this increasing pile of information. It's why we're difficult to work with. It's why we're difficult to understand. It's because we have to go through what information is coming through as fast as possible. Now, I want you to go back to that intersection. And I want you to imagine that feeling of chaos in a classroom environment. You can hear the lights buzzing, you can hear the fan whirring, you can hear the clock ticking, you can hear people scribbling with pencils on paper, you can hear people tapping, you can hear the wind outside, you can see and hear all these things, and it's confusing. It's why we click, it's why we tap our feet, it's why we make sound. It's to create order in this huge amount of chaos. And sometimes we just do it because there's a lack of information. We do it because our brain craves that information rush. Now, ADHD is sort of an umbrella term. There are many different types of ADHD. So the first type, you've got people who are extremely unorganized, people who are extremely hyper-energetic, they don't know when to be quiet, they don't know when to calm down. And then you've got the people who are very calm. They like to relax, they like being by themselves, they're lazy. And then you've got the third type, and these people can be more aggressive, more conflictual. They tend to have things such as OCD, which is obsessive-compulsive disorder. And then there's a fourth type. And the fourth type is a mix of all the three others. I'm one of the four. Right? I'm the fourth type. I can be extremely unorganized. You can ask my teachers about that. I can be extremely energetic, and sometimes I really don't know when to be quiet. You can ask my parents about that. Actually, don't. But then I can also be very calm, and sometimes I like to be by myself. Sometimes I like to sit in my room and just think or just watch stuff by myself. And then I can be very conflictual. I argue with my parents, quite a bit over small things. And again, there are certain things I have to have in a particular way, otherwise I don't feel comfortable. Now, I remember back in 9th grade, I was watching this YouTube video about a guy talking about his experience with ADHD when he was a kid. And I found that I could relate to a lot of what he was talking about. And I went to my parents and I told them this, and then through the help of the school psychiatrist, and through a lot of testing and questioning, I was eventually diagnosed with ADHD. And then through the help of my learning support teachers, my advisor, my parents, my friends, I was able to manage ADHD. And for example, my learning support teachers, they gave me stress balls, so things that I could squeeze when I could sense I was getting off task. Where I had this little buzzer that I'd attach to my trousers, and it would go off every 30 to 40 seconds, and that would remind me that I need to concentrate on what's important at that time. Now, ADHD is not a disadvantage. ADHD is something that we're born with, and we have to deal with it, and we have to learn how to learn with it. And, people with ADHD shouldn't be discriminated, ignored, or made fun of just because of the fact that they don't function the same way other people do. ADHD has its pros and cons. The pros, for example, for myself, I'm able to pick out smaller details faster than other people. And this is particularly good, especially with one of my passions, which is video gaming. I play a lot of video games. And it's extremely useful to have ADHD when playing competitive games online, because I can see things faster than other people. And it also helps, for example, when I do drama. When I'm on stage, because I perform on stage, when I'm on stage, and I see something that's changed, I'm able to quickly react to and change my performance based off of something minuscule. But then it has its cons, it has its negatives. And one of the main negatives is the fact that I disrupt other people. Not intentionally, I don't mean to, but via my way of coping with the information, I can help distract other people. And yes, sometimes the cons outweigh the pros. But at the end of the day, I've got to deal with that, and I've got to learn how to manage that. Because ADHD is something I was born with, and it makes me who I am. Thank you.